I want to bring up a guest who has shown incredible courage. Their courage was the impetus for an investigation which revealed a broken reporting system in our medical system. It brought an issue of a rare cancer caused by breast implants from a whisper into the light, from that darkness into the light. Our guest is joined by the reporter who broke her story, Toronto Star journalist Robert Cribb. Please welcome Terri McGregor and Robert Cribb.
It is so weird to be in a room filled with people who think journalists serve a meaningful purpose. It's such an honor to be here. This never happens, believe me. This never happens. Where are you people on Twitter? Why are you people not saying anything? I don't understand. Terri McGregor has joined us. She's come from North Bay to be with us tonight, 10 days after a major surgery, which is all wrapped up in the medical nightmare that has been her life for the past 3 years. So let me just first say thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. We're tremendously honored. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
So I called you last year out of the blue. I said, listen, I'm working on this big story. It's about faulty medical devices implanted into Canadians with sometimes terrifying results. And here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to open up your entire life on the record, including your most personal and sensitive health details for the front page of the newspaper to tell this story. And you said, for reasons that are entirely incomprehensible to me, yes, I will do that. Why in God's name did you do that?
It's so funny, my choice to choose breast implants was the most private, personal decision of my life. And so I think, you know, the universe has some irony that all of a sudden now I'm on the front page of the paper. But at the end of the day, my experience was simply that your need for anonymity and my need to keep my privacy was so less important than the greater good for Canadian women. And so you put your anonymity aside and put on a brave face and hope that you're going to help somebody else.
Amen. Like many women, millions of women, you took this decision seriously at the time. You're a smart woman. You're very well researched. I've learned a lot about you. You did the math. You read the Health Canada website. You talked to your doctor. You gave careful and thoughtful consideration to this. The advice that you got and what you read and heard and saw was the science is clear. It's safe, tested, proven, licensed, good. You're good.
Good to go.
In 2015, you're then, 6 years later, you're sitting in your doctor's office in Toronto and you are told that you have acquired a rare form of cancer tied directly to textured implants, which are the devices that you received. And worse than that, it's bad. You're stage 4, 3 to 6 months to live. Given what you read and were told at the time, how did your mind comprehend what you had heard that day?
I actually, when I think back at that moment, I think we can all relate to, you know, sitting in front of our clinician or our doctor and being given that survival or lack of. And so when your mortality is put in front of your face and said, you know, it's 3 to 6 months. Unbelievable that I had elected a surgery in my early 40s. This was not a self-esteem issue or self-confidence issue. And that these breast implants were going to be the death of me, literally. And so in that moment, you know, I guess my next thought was, if I'm not going to be here in 3 to 6 months, how do I make this easier on my mom, on my 2 children, on my husband? And then you go through this process of shame, for me, shame and guilt that I'd given myself cancer. But I had done my research, and Health Canada was one of the sources I'd gone to make this decision, which is probably why Health Canada became my target, my personal target.
Yeah, so I want you to talk about that, because you did something that a lot of people don't do. You in addition to dealing with your own health issues, you became a voice, you became an advocate, you directed questions repeatedly at Health Canada, you demanded response, you became a real voice. What kind of reaction did you get from regulators and physicians when you started demanding answers to these questions?
The Health Canada, I continually went after them for attention to our cancer and the fact that we had a product on that they had licensed that was now potentially going to kill women, which makes no sense. And I was dismissed. I was ignored. Any kind of recognition was simply that it's not really that big a deal. There's not enough of you. You don't count. And so that minimization was really the only answer coming out of Health Canada.
So fast forward, the story eventually runs. It took many months to get this story. I'll just say because of the sensitive nature of this issue, and it wasn't just breast implants, it was all types of implants. It took many months to get plastic surgeons on the record. Eventually we were able to publish a story in November that documented comments from a dozen preeminent plastic surgeons who painstakingly went on the record and said, this is this is the best kept secret in plastic surgery. We all quietly know about it. Many of us stopped using it. We quietly call for them to be banned. None of this was public information. The data that they shared with us from their own patients was extraordinary data that clearly Health Canada was aware of. And there you are on the front page, splayed out. What was it like for you to read your own story in such a public way?
Uncomfortable. I like to read other people's stories, not my own. I'm not an attention seeker, so it's very uncomfortable. I did give my sons, obviously out of respect, they were very much behind me and support me in my advocacy work. And it's funny, my son was on the TTC and saw the paper open with his picture as well. And on his way to work, and he sent me a photo and said, hey, and then this happened this morning on my way to work. I'm on the cover. So of course my kids made it all about them, which is perfect, right?
So 2-3 weeks later, something extraordinary happened that none of us thought was going to happen because we've all done major investigations involving Health Canada, and we'd never really seen much in terms of reaction. But there was an extraordinary moment where they called a press conference and announced sweeping changes to the entire regulatory system for medical devices. They were going to reform the way they were licensed. They were going to monitor them after they were implanted into Canadians' bodies. They were going to make the data public. They were going to create a new advisory council for women. And most importantly, this just happened 2-3 weeks ago, extraordinarily, they've announced that they're taking steps to ban textured breast implants before the FDA, the very devices that made you suffer so greatly. What was it like to see, after all of that intransigence and slamming up against the brick wall, to see almost instantly that level of dramatic change?
Yeah, I think disbelief. Patient advocates, thankfully for technology, we talk all the time. We are always pushing for awareness. And then all of a sudden to have, this entity that had ignored us and dismissed us, and these surgeons who want to keep this quiet except for this very small group of ethical, moral, patient-first surgeons, it was actually unbelievable. I mean, we were on the phone, elated, crying, disbelief. The same entity that had ignored us for so long, now Health Canada stepped out before any other country in the world to say, this is wrong, and this needs to change. And I'm not comfortable with my personal story, but I'm told to tell it all the time because there's a human connection, and hopefully you're going to make a human connection. And for example, those same people that had ignored me at Health Canada, called us to a meeting at the last minute before the FDA, and their body language and the box of Kleenex that was passed around the staff members of the Health Canada, the Kleenex and the tissue was for them because they were crying and they were shaking their heads that this could really be happening in our country. So to go from, up against a brick wall, pushing a snowball uphill to all of a sudden see this radical change in 2 weeks, because you write stories that relate, hopefully, our health minister is still a human, and somewhere in those very sad stories of many, many patients, obviously the connection was made.
The minister you mentioned, Health Minister Petitpas, has clearly made this a priority. And she talked about being touched by the stories of the people that we featured, including you in the story. And it's clear to me that her tremendous interest in this is very much tied to the humanity of people like you that were willing to come forward. What for you, at the end of the day, was the most meaningful or important outcome of this entire exercise that you took part in?
Without a doubt, lives are going to be saved, and I'm not trying to be dramatic. We know of at least 2 women who were laying in bed, mistreated, watching the news one night, and were failing chemo. They were re-diagnosed with the correct cancer that they have, treated successfully. I can tell you that those 2 women would be dead, and since that story broke, my inbox every day is from strangers, Canadians across the country, who are calling me, asking me for help. So what we know at the end of the day is lives are saved. So, we hear lots of sad stories, and our stories are sad, but the outcome at the end of the day is there will be more Canadian women alive from this story than would be if it wasn't told.
Let me just say what an honor it has been to meet you through all of this. And on behalf of all Canadians, really, thank you so much. Terri McGregor.